everybody, welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm out in the torch shop, going to make another marble today. But as I get started, I wanted to show a little trick here, a couple little things about gold fuming, and how I handle this little pieces of gold. So I'm going to add a little piece of gold onto the end of a rod that I've already been using for gold fuming. So this has got some cobalt glass on the very end here, and the cobalt glass, I don't know, I heard this long time ago that this was a good thing to use for holding gold. Some people, they use quartz rods for gold and silver fuming, but I've never had a quartz rod to mess with, but that's kind of a whole nother realm. But every once in a while I get a little, I cut off the gold to start with from a little 1 gram bullion cube, little chunk, stamp size sort of thing, and so I just nip off little pieces of that, and that will, it's pretty much kind of a little flat thing or whatever, it'll sit there wherever you put it down. But if that little bead pops off of there, it's going to be a little roly-poly bead of gold. So on my marver plate, I've got a couple little spots, and you're not going to be able to really see that, but a couple little spots that just have a little tiny indent in it, and I just use a tungsten pick or whatever you got to just, you know, graphite's soft, you just kind of drill a little hole, a little pocket there. So when you pick up, I've got a little bead of gold down here on the marver plate. You can set it there and it'll kind of hold in place. So as you move around, it's not going to just roll away. If you don't have that little pocket, you can't keep it on a marver plate like that. Excuse me. So this rod still has a little speck of gold on there. So we try and bring this right up under the flame to warm up this base plate, and slowly introduce that gold end into the flame. Heat that up until it's glowing, and then we're going to try and touch down to this other speck of glass that's there, come back up into the flame, and now you got quite a little ball of gold sitting there in the end, and we're going to kind of burn it in a little bit, let it try and sort of settle into the cobalt. Gold has a tendency to submarine. When you heat it up, it's heavier, so it'll just kind of sink down into the glass. So it gets a little tricky. Sometimes you lose glass when it pops off onto the bench. Sometimes you kind of lose it when it submarines into the glass, the cobalt in this case, that is holding it. So anyway, that's my little tips on managing that. Today, what are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to make sort of a ribbon cane, basically with fuming, using a 15 millimeter rod or so to start with. And I'm going to make a little ribbon cane, spiral that onto some tubing, which I didn't lay out here. Try and lay everything out when I get started. I forgot that part. I'll find something here. And I'm going to coil that on the end of a piece of tubing so that I can collapse that down to be basically just a solid section of ribbon cane that's been spiraled, wound onto basically. That's going to go into the little garage here, stay hot, and that's going to be introduced into my marble design as a piece that's going crosswise. So to make some of these transitions from one axis to another, it's not something you can do directly onto a marble construction, so we're going to do this kind of off as a separate piece. So just heating up a little piece of glass off the end of this rod, making a little flattened area. This kind of little simple fume cane is quite useful for a lot of different applications and projects. And heat up to get those chill marks, freeze marks out of there. Now I'm going to do kind of a two-tone. So we're going to start off with silver on here. And we're going to add one stripe of clear down the middle, just for a little variation. I was thinking I could just do gold straight onto the silver, but we're going to incorporate a little stripe of clear here. Try and heat this in a little bit without trying not to burn out the silver. And then we're going to go for some gold fume. So see if we can keep this little speck of gold on here. Alrighty. Then we need to build up a layer of clear. Get your clear rod nice and hot, and then it just flows on there without any air trap. Or there may be little hairline areas, but that usually melts out. Isn't really an issue. And backside fume is kind of spilled over all over the place. I don't want it on the backside. So a little bit of flaming that off. melt in that initial application of clear. I'll come back and build this up a little bit more. Okay, that's looking pretty full. And we'll heat up and cut off this bigger rod. Generally speaking, you shouldn't cross underneath your torch like I just did. It's nice and soupy. So I like kind of little ribbon cane things like this. I like to kind of get an initial gentle twist going, and sometimes you need to kind of barrel that. You want to get a nice, fairly consistent, even section that's got some twist going on, and then we can come back and do this a little more pinpointed and twist this out. So pulling this out, trying to think about what size I want this cane to be. Medium size, that's a good size. So I'll probably have some left over here to use for some other project. I end up with a lot of leftovers. Okay, that got pulled out a little uneven there, and I didn't leave myself a very good handle, so I'm going to condense this back. So I'll just leave this small 3mm rod as the handle on one end. So cut this off and tear off a little bit of extra there and make a termination. Okay. Alright, well, I did not keep a piece of tubing ready for this, so just have to grab what I've got here. Alright, open up that end. Just needs to be an opening. So we're going to spiral this on here. Hopefully. So this is essentially kind of a coil pot idea. But I don't want this to end up hollow. I want a solid piece. And I don't want to use any glass aside from this little cane that I built. So, try and do is get this to condense down. From one end to the other. So we'll close off this furthest out end. And to see if we can coax that heat to move through this coil pot and collapse it down, drive that air up the tube. It's not something I really have done on purpose lately. So it's one of those things, it's like envision this marble design and think, well, this should work. As long as I'm patient at this step, and I may have to elongate out in order to keep that section that's melting in. So with the heat can penetrate in there. Seems to be working. It is a bit tedious. So making ribbon cane like this and using fuming and so on, my hope is that you can still see through this pattern, that it won't be all that solid opaque. But sometimes you get the fuming too dense and the pattern too complex, and you don't wind up really seeing through it. I mean, that little air bubble down the center is pretty tenacious. Actually, get a handle on this, and sometimes heating and cooling, letting it cool down, that's condensing and contracting that little air pocket. Bump this up a bit. Still going to probably wind up with a very thin little air bubble inside there. And sometimes those air trap things are kind of interesting in their own right. Because if I keep messing with this too much, I'm just going to lose the pattern here. Okay, well, I think I've trapped a little bit of air. So we'll go ahead and cut this loose from the tubing. If I had my actual blow tube that I intended to do this with, I could have pulled that air out, I think. Would have been a better idea. But like I say, sometimes these little air traps are kind of interesting too. Pull that end out. Yeah, the whole idea of going through all this gyrations is going to switch axes here. This becomes the little jewel to go into the core of the marble. So we'll kind of let this draw itself out. And we'll put this in the garage. Cools down a little minute. Okay, building up base chunk of glass so we can put our core element into it. Got a little shot of wintry weather out there. It started snowing last night, some wet, heavy snow, and it's supposed to drop down to freezing tonight. Not ideal. Hopefully it warms up enough to melt off so the trees don't get, and bushes don't get damaged. Glass is condensing and building up this area right back where I'm tearing some of this off. Kind of accumulates some of the surface glass that has little different characteristics. So that Hopefully helps clean up the optics of the finished piece. Then in the process of doing that, I introduce new little bubbles that I have to peel out. Alright, that's pretty good. You have to be careful when you're playing around with two pieces of glass you're trying to join, that you don't accidentally touch them together before you want them to go together. Alright, I'm going to bring these into each other. And flame off this handle. Now using some focused heat on either side, so the flat sides. Let those expand out a little bit. So I don't want to do any shaping here. I'm just trying to let this glass find its own balance. At this point, I'd rather it just kind of as a rounded, it's a round shape. The next step, I'm going to add some kind of accents into the background. So I want this base to be pretty stable right now. And I'm going to add a couple other features here. We've got some sublime colored glass here. I'll try and do this as kind of fairly chunky application here. I have a particular number of stripes I intended to do to begin with, but I ended up with 5. That's good. It's a good number. And then I'm going to use a Rhapsody, which is kind of purple. I'm going to put that in between here. Now after this, then we are going to be kind of trying to go to our cone shape, but I'll get there slowly. First, we just really need to get this glass settled in. So a lot of these projects, I kind of come up with some different ideas the last few days, and then I try and lay out. I've got stringers for the background for the backside color. I've got some glass that I'm going to do the next step with the background. I've got this Sublime and this Rhapsody fuming gold and silver rods set out. I didn't set out my blow hose though, which was kind of an important part of this design, so I just kind of decided to just wing it there, which maybe I shouldn't have done. Okay, getting this whole mass really pulled together, just as a big old blob. And now, to somehow manage to get this to the cone shape without getting things too messed up. Some of the shaping, the heat, the pushing, and so on, it's kind of hard to describe what exactly I'm doing. I just have done this a lot of times, and there's a lot of subtle pushing and pulling relative to the marble. It's not always very obvious. So we've got pretty much our cone shape going on. And now we are going to gold fume the background and put on our cobalt, dark cobalt, in a thick spiral, which is a little different than what I usually do. We'll see how that goes. But to get this gold to get this piece kind of chilled down a little bit, so make this gold more effective. So there's color, even though the Sublime is kind of clear looking. There's these colored sections backed by gold fume, which we'll see how that turns out. Alright, so I pulled out this rod is a little thicker. It's not quite the stringer size that so I'm not trying to get quite the same. I'm not trying to do a smooth background. I want to actually build up some texture. So I'll kind of draw out this first layer, set the stage. So we're going to draw this as a spiral, putting this glass on kind of thick, leaving a little bit of a gap. Hopefully I pulled out a sufficient amount of this glass to do what I want to do here. Looks like I've got plenty of it. That's another thing that just kind of comes from feel and experience as to how much prep do you need in terms of its caliber, length, and so on. Okay, now I've got this open spiral, have the gold fume trapped under this spiral. I'm trying again get this to just naturally melt in. And then we'll go in and fill in the rest of this space. So I'm going to need this base to kind of cool down and solidify so we don't get distorting things too much. So it's sort of in one sense, it's kind of a subtle variation of what I normally do, but normally I'm trying to develop just a smooth, relatively smooth background. This time I was actually hoping to get a little texture going on. Now I can use a little bit of force to get this to push together. Alright, well now it's a matter of do a little bit of silver fume on this cobalt on the back side, and then fill out the general shaping, block out the back hemisphere. Cobalt is just really well suited to gold and silver fuming. Just does a good job. Alright. Push this end, push that clear back, and leave that very tip of color exposed. Pull this together on this wide circumference, and you got an area to fill in between, basically. I kind of like to start off still adding right down at the tip. You hear this crazy kind of scaled pattern of that fume. Every one of these little wiggles with the clear glass left a scale of that fuming. It's kind of a cool pattern on its own. It reminds me just of a metal welding. Somewhere down here I've got it in my mug. This is my colored picture mug of all these different marbles. It's kind of cool. See some of these crazy designs that I did. These are all from a while back too. Alright, not quite done yet filling out this back. Okay, see if we can melt this together. Alright, pretty much done with most of this stuff. And on the background, I'm going to do, this is a glass that I got recently. It's kind of a soft pastel pinky purple, black and red. See what that comes up with. Alright, get this solid for a minute. Okay, that's black. Hung up here. Then you get a ways into the marble, and it's good to check your kiln temperature is up to speed, so when you're done with this, you got some place to put it. Every once in a while, you get out here making a marble, I forgot to turn on the kiln. And you gotta sit here with a finished marble and fiddle around with the flame for 20 minutes or so, waiting for the kiln to get hot. I do have this small garage unit that could set a piece in there, and that warms up pretty quickly. While you're waiting for the kiln to warm up, you could kind of garage your piece in there. It's good to have options. And I really appreciate y'all that have hung in here to watch one of these videos. I hope that these are useful to people, they're instructive and helpful in some way. I'm not trying to teach anybody how to do glass, but I'm just trying to share some of what I do, what I know, and hopefully it helps someone. So any color lines like this, before you go raking them, they really need to be cooked in pretty thoroughly. I would say keep going at it a bit more than you would think it needs. And once again, of course, it's heat base built up pretty deep, so gotta wait for it to settle down before we start raking. So the next step is I do a continuous rake in essentially two sections. I do kind of a good part of it and then come back and do the end. You need to heat up your tungsten pick. Come in and heat a little section, again, kind of more than you think it would need. I'm going to start off because you're going to heat this, then rotate just a touch, and try and just keep that heat leading ahead. So you're trying to break this right behind where it was heated. Oops, and that just ripped open a little bit. Don't really want it to do that. Okay, well that one's somewhat problematic. Trying to heal up some of these places that kind of opened up. There's the big one. Some of this might have been my imagination. I thought it was coming apart some other places. Pull out that tip and start cooking this back end. Pumpy on the back side, and adjust the firepower here. We'll start off just with the smaller flame, which is kind of cranked up, but let's start off this front lens gather and conversion. This transition line between the clear and the colored halves will expand out here slowly. In some transitions it's better to kind of be gentle about it rather than just spend some heat and forcing it. Pick up the heat here. I'm going to be pretty gentle here. going towards our acorn shape. Got grease in there and direct the heat back at the marble side. I should go in here a couple times to cut this in. Pull this out and pause and try to cut it where it's thin. Okay, now we get to rip off this glass we don't want. Okay, I think I got everything. Or not. I can't take off too much glass, but don't have any lens left. From our acorn shape to our eggy shape. Alright, introduce this to the marble mold. And we're just trying to get that front lens face just kind of rounded off. Nothing fancy at this point. Maybe hit this circumference. Okay, that's part of the geometry going. Transfer punties. Yeah, it's kind of my first opportunity to take a peek inside. Something that makes this kind of an art form that's different than many others is as you go through these steps here, you don't see, it's not like you're painting or sculpting where you can really see what's happening. What is going on, it's kind of mysterious, and you don't know exactly what it's going to look like until the next day it comes out of the kiln. So it's an interesting process of trying to visualize what's happening inside, trying to go through steps to create certain effects that you think you can create. But in the end, it turns out always with a bit of a surprise. Very rarely do I make a marble and it comes out like, yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to do, or thought it would do. So it's definitely, you're always working as a collaborative artist when you're working with hot glass. It's doing what it wants to do, and Some people maybe take the attitude they want to dominate the glass and force it to do things, but to me, it's more of a collaboration. It's doing certain things that it wants to do. You can assist it. But you're going to have a hard time if you're trying to force it to do something it really does not want to do. And of course, that's part of pushing the boundaries artistically with any medium, is to do things that everybody else told you can't be done. So for some people, like my wife, you tell her you can't do that. That is her best inspiration to see if she can do it. Now we went from the acorn shape to the egg shape, and now it's at the apple, bit of an apple shape. So I've got the punky attached. It's kind of compressed in a little bit, letting it hang to kind of draw that back out a bit. There's another one that's just on the edge, just kind of sits all the way inside the marble mold, and I really prefer to have it resting on the rim. Okay, kind of pulling the heat out of this marble right now. And I'll come back on the back side and do a pretty serious heat, kind of rotate slowly. This is basically just flame polishing. Make sure we get that back end completely hot, but we're trying to heat just the surface and then get out of the heat. Keep rotating and let that naturally settle out, smooth out. Yeah, it's cool. All right. On our last puntee. Alright, so we need to heat this face pretty hot, and so we still are trying to form this front lens. It's not conforming to the sphere at the moment. Close, but not quite. So again, we want to just move that outer layer, so we don't want to sit in the heat for too long. We're going to go into the marble mold from the back side, set down gently, come up to capture that full front face. And that behaved quite well. And we'll run it through one more time just because this stage mold is likely to cause problems as to fix problems. So you wind up with a little wrinkle at the very end. I'm kind of trying to focus that heat mostly on the outer face, center of the front face. And I'm going to use a little bit of an angle. Because I just know from experience these tend to be a little snub nose, a little bit of flat nose on the end. And just use a little bit of gravity to let that kind of shape out, fill out. Excuse me. Need some more marble water. Pretty cool. Try to get around here. Plenty left a little bit more clear on there than usual, so I'm just going to cook that in. Looking at the reflections. Looks pretty good. I'd call that a wrap. Alright guys, thanks for hanging in there. If you've been watching the series and watching this video, really appreciate you. Give a thumbs up, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And leave me a comment. What do you think of all this? What would you like me to do next? Always open to some kind of ideas. Yeah, this is sweet. It's a nice marble. Get this in the kiln. And we can get about our day. Whatever else you got going on today, have a happy day. And be kind to all those around you. Be kind to yourself. And we'll see you guys next time.